From mysterious roommates who vanish without a trace, to hostels with rooms that shouldn't exist, to encounters that blur the line between the living and the dead. These stories come from real people who lived through experiences that changed them forever. So dim the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for true scary hostel stories that will make you question what really lurks in those shadowy corners of budget accommodations around the world. Every hostel has rules. No noise after 10 p.m., no outside guests, no smoking in rooms. Clean up after yourself in the kitchen. Basic stuff that makes communal living bearable. But the Somnius Hostel in Edinburgh had different rules. Rules that seemed odd at first, then increasingly sinister as I realized why they existed. I should have paid attention to the reviews that mentioned strict policies and unusual management style. I should have wondered why a hostel in the middle of Edinburgh's Old Town was so cheap during festival season. Instead, I was focused on saving money and scoring accommodation in a city where hotel rooms were going for £300 a night. The Somnius Hostel occupied a narrow 4-story building wedged between a pub and a souvenir shop on the Royal Mile. From the outside, it looked like countless other hostels. Historic stone facade, small windows, discreet sign hanging above an unremarkable door. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was different. The lobby was dimly lit and absolutely silent. Not just quiet silent. No background music, no conversations, no sounds from the street outside despite the door being directly on one of Edinburgh's busiest tourist thoroughfares. The silence felt oppressive, almost solid. Behind a heavy wooden desk sat a young man who looked to be in his early 20s, pale, thin, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested chronic exhaustion. He looked up as I entered, and I was struck by how relieved he seemed to see me. "You must be Jennifer," he said in a Scottish accent that sounded strained, as if he hadn't spoken in hours. "I'm David, night manager. Welcome to Somnius." "Thanks," I replied, automatically lowering my voice to match the oppressive quiet. "This place is really peaceful." Something flickered across David's face. Fear, maybe. Or warning. "Yes, we take our rest very seriously here. Before I can give you your key, I need to go over our house rules. They're specific." He pulled out a laminated card covered in densely printed text. Not the usual no smoking, no noise list I expected, but detailed instructions that filled both sides of the card. "Rule 1, David began, reading directly from the card as if afraid to paraphrase. "Guests must be in their assigned rooms by 11 p.m. each night. Room doors must be locked from the inside. Do not open your door between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. for any reason." "What if there's an emergency?" I asked. "There won't be," David said quickly. "Rule 2. If you hear voices in the hallway between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., do not respond. Do not listen to what they're saying. Cover your ears and wait for silence." I laughed nervously. Is this some kind of joke? Like a haunted hostel theme? David's expression became deadly serious. "This is not a joke." Rule 3. If someone knocks on your door during restricted hours, do not answer. Even if they claim to be staff or emergency services, even if they sound like someone you know. "David, this is getting weird." Rule 4, he continued relentlessly. If you encounter other guests in the hallway between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., do not speak to them. Do not make eye contact. Return to your room immediately and lock the door. What kind of place is this? Rule 5. Never go to the basement level. The door is marked staff only and is kept locked, but if you ever find it open, do not enter. If you accidentally see the basement level, report it to management immediately. He flipped the card over, revealing more rules. Rule 6. If you wake up and find your room door unlocked, do not leave the room. Wait until 7 a.m., then report it to staff. Rule 7. Do not use the elevators between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Use stairs only, and move quickly and quietly. This is insane, I said. What happens if I break these rules? David looked at me with eyes that held too much knowledge for someone his age. You won't, he said simply. Not if you want to check out alive. Before I could respond, he slid a key across the desk. Room 23, second floor. Here's your key card and the rules card. Keep it with you at all times. Despite every instinct telling me to leave, I took the key. The festival had left me with limited options, and I'd already paid for 3 nights. How bad could it be? Room 23 was basic but clean. Twin beds, small bathroom, window overlooking the Royal Mile. My roommate hadn't arrived yet, so I had the space to myself. I spent the evening exploring Edinburgh, trying to push the strange rules out of my mind. I returned to the hostel around 10:30 p.m., tired and ready for sleep. The lobby was empty now, David having been replaced by an older woman who barely acknowledged my presence. The building felt different at night, heavier somehow, as if the darkness carried physical weight. In my room, I set my alarm for 7 a.m. and settled into bed. At exactly 11 p.m., I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. The mechanical click of every door in the building locking simultaneously. Not just locking, sealing. The sound was too heavy, too final for ordinary locks. It was as if the building itself was securing its occupants inside. Then the voices started. At first, just whispers in the hallway outside my door. Soft conversations that I couldn't quite make out. I remembered David's warning about not listening. But curiosity got the better of me. I pressed my ear to the door. Should have read the rules more carefully. A woman's voice was saying, "The new girl in 23 won't last the night," replied a man. "They never do when they don't follow the rules. Remember the one last month? Opened her door when we knocked. Thought we were staff. What happened to her?" asked a third voice. Younger, more afraid. "Same thing that happens to all of them. She's in the basement now." My heart pounded as I realized they were talking about me. But how did they know I was in room 23? And what did they mean about the basement? The conversation continued, but I forced myself to pull away from the door. Rule 2. Don't listen to what they're saying. Cover your ears and wait for silence. I buried my head under my pillow, but the voices seemed to penetrate anyway. They were discussing other guests, other rule breakers, other people who had joined the basement residence. The more I tried not to listen, the clearer their words became. "David's getting tired," one voice said. "How long has he been night manager now?" 3 months, longer than most. "He'll break soon. They always do. The job changes you. At least he's better than the last one. Remember Sarah? Started warning guests about the real rules. She's in the basement now too." I sat up in bed, pillow clutched to my chest. Were they talking about previous staff members? Had David's predecessor tried to warn guests and been punished for it? A new voice joined the conversation outside my door. "David himself, you shouldn't be talking near the guest rooms," he said. His voice tight with fear. "You know the rules about contact." "We're not breaking any rules," one of the others replied. "We're in the hallway during permitted hours, and we're not talking to her. We're talking about her. She can hear you. That's her choice. We're not forcing her to listen." David's voice moved closer to my door. "Jennifer, if you can hear this, cover your ears. Don't listen to them. They're not bound by the same rules we are." "Oh, David," laughed the woman's voice. "Still trying to save them. You know how this ends." I heard David's footsteps retreat down the hallway, and the voices faded with him. But sleep was impossible now. Every creak of the old building, every sound from the street below, made me jump. I kept checking my door, making sure it was still locked. Around 2 a.m., someone knocked. 3 soft raps, barely audible. I froze in my bed. remembering Rule 3. If someone knocks during restricted hours, don't answer, even if they claim to be staff or emergency services. Jennifer, came David's voice through the door. I need to speak with you. Every instinct told me to respond. It sounded exactly like David, complete with his Scottish accent and the strained quality I'd noticed earlier. But the rules were clear. Please, the voice continued. I know you're awake. I can help you understand what's happening here. I bit my lip to keep from answering. The voice sounded so genuine, so concerned, but I remembered what the other voices had said about the previous night manager, Sarah, who had tried to warn guests. The others are planning something, David's voice said urgently. You need to know the truth about this place, about what happens to guests who don't follow the rules. The knocking came again, more insistent. Jennifer, please, I'm trying to save you. Then another voice joined in. The woman from earlier. She's not going to answer, David. She's actually following the rules for once. Leave her alone, David's voice snapped. She doesn't need to know yet. Doesn't need to know what? That she's already trapped? That checking in was easy. But checking out? The woman laughed coldly. Well, that depends on how well she follows the rules. Stop, David pleaded. You're scaring her. She should be scared. Fear keeps them alive longer. The voices moved away from my door, continuing their conversation down the hallway. I remained frozen in bed until the building fell silent again. The next morning, I confronted David at the front desk. Was that really you outside my door last night? I asked. His face went pale. What time? Around 2 a.m. You were asking me to let you in. David's hands trembled as he set down the papers he'd been holding. No, he whispered. I was in the office all night. I never left. Then who was it? He glanced around the empty lobby before leaning closer. Rule 3 exists for a reason, he said quietly. They can sound like anyone. Staff, emergency services, people you know. But between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., nothing that knocks on your door is what it claims to be. What are they? I don't know, David admitted. I've only been here 3 months. The previous night manager left suddenly. Sarah? David's eyes widened. How do you know that name? I heard them talking about her. They said she tried to warn guests about the real rules. You listened to them? David's voice was sharp with panic. You broke Rule 2? I tried not to, but you have to be more careful, he interrupted. They're testing you now. Every night will be worse until you either follow the rules perfectly or what? David couldn't meet my eyes. Or you join the others in the basement. What's in the basement? Before he could answer, the front door opened and an elderly couple entered. David immediately straightened, his expression becoming professionally neutral. Welcome to Somnus Hostel, he said brightly. But I caught the warning look he shot me. Our conversation was over. That second night, I was determined to follow every rule perfectly. I locked myself in my room at exactly 11 p.m. and settled into bed with earplugs and a sleeping mask. But the Somnus Hostel wasn't finished testing me. I woke around midnight to find my room door standing wide open. Rule 6. If you wake up and find your room door unlocked, do not leave the room. Wait until 7 a.m., then report it to staff. But my door wasn't just unlocked. It was completely open, revealing the dark hallway beyond. I could see shapes moving in the shadows, figures that seemed to beckon me forward. I fumbled for the light switch, but nothing happened. The electricity was out, leaving me in complete darkness except for the faint glow from the hallway's emergency lighting. One of the shapes in the hallway moved closer, resolving into a human figure. A woman in a night manager's uniform, but not one I recognized. "You must be Jennifer," she said in a voice that sounded like David's but coming from a woman's throat. "I'm Sarah, the night manager. I need to show you something important." She extended her hand toward me, and I saw that her fingers were too long, her smile too wide. "Come with me," she continued in David's voice. "I'll explain everything about the rules, about why they exist." Behind her, more figures gathered in the hallway. Guests, staff members, people wearing clothing from different decades, all of them watching me with eyes that reflected light like an animal's. "Don't be afraid," said the thing wearing Sarah's face. "We just want to show you the truth about Somnus, about what happens to people who don't follow the rules." My hand was halfway to hers before I caught myself. "Rule 6. Do not leave the room." I jerked my hand back and scrambled to my door, pushing it closed and frantically turning the lock. The moment the door clicked shut, I heard them laughing, dozens of voices, all mimicking David's accent and speech patterns. "Clever girl," they said in unison, "but the night is young." I spent the rest of the night huddled in bed, watching my door handle turn repeatedly as they tested the lock. Sometimes they knocked softly, sometimes they scratched at the wood, sometimes they whispered my name through the keyhole. But I didn't open the door. The next morning, David looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept either. "You did well," he said quietly when I approached the desk. "Your door was open?" I nodded. "They're getting impatient," he said. "Usually takes longer for them to try the unlocked door trick." "What do they want?" David hesitated, then pulled out a folder from beneath the desk. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing hostel guests from different time periods, all smiling, all looking normal, except for their eyes. They all had the same reflective quality I'd seen in the hallway figures. "These are the people who broke the rules," David explained. "They're still here, but they're not themselves anymore." I flipped through the photos, recognizing some of the faces from the hallway. "How long have they been here?" "Some for months, others for decades. The hostel has been operating since the 1950s, but the rules haven't changed. Follow them and you can check out safely. Break them." He didn't need to finish. I understood now why the rules existed, why they were so specific. They weren't arbitrary restrictions. They were survival instructions. "Why don't you just close the place down?" I asked. David laughed bitterly. "You think I haven't tried? The building won't let me leave. I've been here 3 months, and every time I try to quit, something stops me. Car breaks down, family emergency, sudden illness. The hostel needs a night manager, and once you take the job, you're trapped too. For now. But I'm hoping if I can help enough guests follow the rules, maybe it will let me go." "How many have you saved?" "You're the first to make it past the second night without breaking a rule." That afternoon, I tried to leave Edinburgh early. I went to the train station, bought a ticket to London, and attempted to board. But as the train pulled away, I found myself standing on the platform, watching it disappear. I had no memory of getting off. I tried again with a bus, then a taxi to the airport. Each time, I somehow ended up back at the hostel, with no clear memory of how I'd gotten there. The building wasn't just enforcing its rules, it was keeping me prisoner until I either followed them perfectly or joined the others in the basement. That third night, I was ready for anything. I locked my door at 11 p.m., covered my ears, and refused to acknowledge any sounds from the hallway. But around 3 a.m., I heard something that made my blood run cold. My own voice, calling from the hallway. "Jennifer, can you hear me? I need help." I pressed my hands tighter against my ears, but the voice continued. "I'm hurt. I'm bleeding. Please, I need you to open the door." It was perfect. My accent, my speech patterns, even the slight lisp I'd had as a child. But I knew it wasn't me. "David was right about the rules," my voice continued. "But he didn't tell you everything. There's a way out, but you have to trust me." I bit my lip until I tasted blood, fighting the urge to respond. Even though it was my own voice, I remembered Rule 4. If you encounter other guests in the hallway during restricted hours, do not speak to them. I know you can hear me, the voice said, becoming more desperate. I escaped, but I came back for you. Open the door, and I'll show you how to leave. Hours passed, but my voice never stopped talking. It told me about escape routes, about weaknesses in the hostel's supernatural hold, about ways to fool the entities that enforce the rules. All lies, I knew, but told in my own voice, with such conviction that I almost believed them. When 7 a.m. finally came and the voices fell silent, I was exhausted but triumphant. I had survived 3 nights by following the rules perfectly. But David wasn't at the front desk when I came down to check out. Instead, an older woman sat behind the counter, someone I'd never seen before. She looked up as I approached, and I saw that her eyes had the same reflective quality as the figures in the hallway. "Checking out?" she asked in a voice that sounded normal but felt wrong. "Yes," I said carefully. "Room 23. She consulted a ledger that seemed far too old for the modern hostel. "I'm sorry, but there's no record of you checking out today. According to our system, you're booked for an extended stay." "That's impossible. I only paid for 3 nights. Our records show you're a permanent resident now." She smiled, and her teeth were too sharp. "Congratulations on following the rules so well. You've earned your place here. Where's David?" "David?" She pretended to consult the ledger again. "We have no staff member by that name. Perhaps you're thinking of someone else." I ran back upstairs, but room 23 was different now. Instead of basic hostel furniture, it contained personal belongings. My belongings. But things I'd never owned. Photos of me in places I'd never been. Clothes that fit perfectly, but weren't mine. A diary written in my handwriting describing months of life at the hostel. According to the diary, I'd been a permanent resident for 6 months. I'd helped other guests follow the rules, just as David had helped me. I'd even assisted in the orientation of new arrivals. But I remembered only 3 nights. The truth hit me like a physical blow. The rules weren't designed to protect guests. They were designed to train them. Each night was a test, teaching us to be compliant, to follow instructions without question, to ignore our instincts and trust the system. By following the rules perfectly, I hadn't earned my freedom. I'd earned my place among the entities that enforced them. I rushed back to the lobby, but the woman behind the counter was gone. Instead, I found David, but not the David I remembered. This David had the same reflective eyes, the same too sharp smile. "Ah, Jennifer," he said in that familiar accent. "Ready for tonight's shift? We have a new guest arriving, a student from Germany. You'll help me explain the rules to her." I tried to protest, to explain that I'd only been there 3 nights, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Of course, I'll prepare the orientation material." As I spoke, I realized the truth. The David who had helped me wasn't the real night manager. He was a previous guest who had followed the rules so well that he'd been promoted to staff. The cycle continued, with each perfectly compliant guest becoming part of the system that trapped the next one. I wanted to scream, to run, to break every rule and face whatever consequences came. But I couldn't. The programming was too complete, the transformation too thorough. That evening, I stood beside David as a young German woman checked in. She looked nervous, overwhelmed by the oppressive silence of the lobby. "Before I give you your key," David said, pulling out the familiar laminated card, "I need to go over our house rules." I watched her face change as David read through the rules, saw the same confusion and disbelief I'd felt just days earlier. When he finished, she laughed nervously. "Is this some kind of joke, like a haunted hostel theme?" David and I exchanged glances. In that moment, I felt a flicker of my old self, a desperate urge to warn her, to tell her to run while she still could. But instead, I heard myself saying, "This is not a joke. The rules exist for your safety and the safety of other guests. She took her key and headed upstairs, just as I had 3 nights ago. David watched her go, then turned to me with approval. "You're learning quickly," he said. "Soon you'll be ready for more responsibilities." I nodded, but inside, some small part of me was still screaming. That night, I stood in the hallway during the restricted hours, testing the new guest's compliance with the rules. When she pressed her ear to the door to listen, I spoke just loudly enough for her to hear. "The new girl in 15 won't last the night," I said, the words coming from my mouth but not feeling like my own. They never do when they don't follow the rules. Part of me hoped she would break the rules, would refuse to be trained, would find a way to escape that I couldn't. But I knew the truth. The Somnus Hostel was perfect at what it did. It had been refining its methods for decades, learning exactly how to trap travelers who were just looking for a place to sleep. The rules weren't arbitrary restrictions. They were a conditioning program, designed to create perfect compliance, and I was living proof of how well they worked. If you ever find yourself at a hostel with unusually specific rules, if the staff seem too eager to help you follow them, if other guests warn you about the importance of compliance, don't try to be the perfect guest. Don't follow the rules. Break them all and run as fast as you can. Because some accommodations don't just offer a bed for the night, they offer a permanent place to stay, whether you want it or not. And once you've proven you can follow the rules perfectly, you'll never be allowed to leave.